The Holocaust wasn't a necessary part of World War II. It was brought about by Hitler and his prejudice. For context, Jewish people had been discriminated against for years since Christianity became a main religion. It had been getting better in the 19th century. Laws were being abolished and Jews were being moved out of the ghettos. And by 1927, they were legally equal to non-Jews. That changed when Hitler came into power. Hitler campaigned on a basis of anti-Semitism, and even though Germany was a young country with weak central power, the majority of Jewish citizens did not agree with him. That changed when the Great Depression hit the world and German citizens were jobless and desperate. Hitler offered a scapegoat in the Jewish population, and people took that bait. Hitler was elected as chancellor and won greater power within the country. From 1933 to 1945, while the Nazi Party and Hitler were in power, were the worst years to be a Jew in Germany. The Holocaust wasn't just concentration camps. It was the horrible attitude and discrimination towards Jews that Hitler spread around Germany. It started with the segregation of citizens, marking them in their homes, forcing them to live in ghettos, giving them separate trains, but it was made worse in 1933 when the Nuremberg laws were passed, stripping Jews of their rights to be a German citizen or marry a non-Jewish person. The laws made it legal and encouraged to beat and show violence towards the Jews in the public. That was when the pre-war part of the Holocaust really kicked off. Hitler perpetrated his views by teaching anti-Semitism in schools and making German children join Hitler Youth. They taught German children to be powerful and support Hitler's agenda. It was made worse when the attendance was made legally compulsory in 1939. In 1938, Hitler took the violence further with government organized grand attacks, and Jews were later made to clean the streets of the violence of the destruction. Concentration camps were set up during World War II because the chaos gave Hitler even freer rein to abuse Jews. But it was not because of the war that the Holocaust happened. It was set in motion before the war. The concentration camps were one of the most prevalent horrors during World War II. Thousands of Jews were brutally murdered and sent to work for the Germans until they died from exhaustion. Upon arrival to these camps, families were split apart into men and women and children, and among them separated further into who can and cannot work. Those who could not work were either shot and killed or sent to the gas chambers. Those who were able-bodied enough to work were sent further into the concentration camps, into small, overcrowded tenants, where they were forced to do incredibly long hours of hard labor, with a great exposure to disease and starvation. On top of all this suffering, the Germans found a need to make the environment worse by constantly beating and undermining the Jews as they worked. In addition, one form of cruel labor was for the able-bodied men to cremate and remove the dead bodies of their Jewish friends and sometimes families. The tenants were in a terrible condition, as well as being overcrowded. There was only one bucket to share among all the prisoners, which greatly increased the risks of disease and infections. The materials of the tenants were not strong enough for the weather and therefore lead to a lack of heat and flooding. In addition, the prisoners were only given one set of clothing which they worked and slept in, reducing the hygiene and sanitation of the workers. The Nuremberg trials were a series of military tribunals hosted by the Allied forces during World War II. Each Allied nation had to send one prosecutor or judge and one alternate or spare. The trials were meant to prosecute the Nazis for their horrendous war crimes. This took place after World War II, ended in the Nuremberg, Germany, in the Palace of Justice. One of the most important and famous trials was the trials of the major war criminals, where 23 of the most important political leaders and military leaders were tried. The Nuremberg trials were a more in-depth and severe extension of the Leipzig war crimes that took place in World War I. After the trial of the major war criminals, another major trial took place called the International Military Tribunal. Over 24 criminals and 7 organizations were prosecuted for their horrible crimes against Jews. The Nuremberg trials were important so that the Nazis took responsibility for their actions. International responses include other countries rejecting Jewish refugees. In the United States and the Allied forces defeated and occupied Nazi Germany and took control of the country. They began to liberate concentration camps one by one from July 1944 onward. Hitler committed suicide, and after his death, many leading Nazis and war criminals went into hiding in fear of punishment. The punishment of the war criminals faced were either death, incarceration, or being acquitted. Nazis, the present day, are found in the form of neo-Nazism, which is when people wish to revive the Nazis and their ways. To date, Germany has the strictest laws in the world, and it is illegal to wear, produce, or sell swastikas.